There are two flavors I'll never forget. One is the simmered hamburger steak my mom used to make. The other is garlic-infused fried chicken. I've never tasted anything at a fancy restaurant that surpasses these. I know why. They're dishes deeply tied to my heart. My name is Jason. I'm a 44-year-old orthopedic surgeon. And, even at this age, I'm still single. I never had the luxury to think about marriage. After my father passed away and the clinic was closed, I worked tirelessly to reopen it myself. I did it for my late parents and for my second mother. My father's orthopedic clinic was located in the heart of the downtown area. There are many patients in this area where a lot of elderly people live. The clinic was always crowded with people. I'm going to Kevin's house. As an elementary school kid, I would throw my backpack down and dash out the door. Kevin, my childhood friend since kindergarten, lived about 10 minutes away from the clinic at his family's bento shop. My father was a doctor, and my mother a nurse, so they were always too busy to leave the clinic. That's why I went to Kevin's place almost every day. Of course, I enjoyed playing with him, but there was something else I looked forward to. "Hey, champ, welcome." Kevin's mom, Mary, always greeted me like that. And while we pretended to work on homework, she'd sneak us some leftovers from the shop. "Study hard, okay?" Sometimes it was a croquette, fried shrimp, grilled meat, or even a rolled omelet. This is kind of a letdown. Yeah, no meat lately. Even as we complained, the side dishes were a feast for us, hungry after school. But there was one thing we always called the jackpot. That was their famous fried chicken. Garlic and spices made it taste so grown up to us. Kevin's mother knew that too. On fried chicken days, she'd always grin and hand some over to us. Both Kevin and I were only children. We were each being raised to take over our family's businesses. We went to the same school through middle school, but our paths finally split in high school. See you around. Yeah. We made that promise on graduation day, but over time, we drifted apart. In the early summer of my junior year, my father went out of town for a conference. By that time, my mother had already passed away. She had fallen ill when I was in the lower grades of elementary school. The only memory I have of her is the simmered hamburger steak she made for my birthday. Since I was so excited and said, "This is delicious," my mom has made it for every celebration and event ever since. Will you be okay on your own? I'll be fine. When I get back, I'll make your mom's hamburger steak for you. I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I waved goodbye as he left. I was planning to invite Kevin over for the first time in a while and enjoy the freedom. We hadn't seen much of each other since we went to different high schools, so I was more focused on that than on my dad's trip. I never imagined it would be our final goodbye. I thought Dad would be back tomorrow. Kevin and I spent the night listening to his favorite artist's music, laughing at meaningless things. Then the phone rang in the middle of the night. Kevin was fast asleep. Rubbing my tired eyes, I picked up the receiver. "Hello? Is this Jason?" A firm voice, like someone hitting a stone. It was my father's colleague, a physician. "What's going on?" "I wanted to let you know about your father. He didn't look well today, he might not be feeling great. He seemed fine when he left, but maybe a doctor's eyes saw something I didn't." "Okay. Thanks for letting me know." I waited anxiously for my dad to return. When he did come back, he indeed looked pale. As a doctor, he must have realized it too. He went for tests at the hospital immediately. The results were grim, and he was given a terminal diagnosis. Treatment began right away. But his body, worn down by years of overwork, didn't last long. Just before I started my senior year of high school, my father passed away peacefully in his sleep. A few days later, we held the funeral. I was still in shock, feeling like I was floating through the whole experience. Not a single tear came. The one who cried the most was Kevin's mother, Mary. "Thank you for everything, Mary." After the service, I thanked her and Kevin as they were leaving. "Champ, if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Mary, her eyes red from crying, looked at me with concern. "Yeah. Thanks to you too, Kevin." Kevin didn't meet my eyes once. He probably didn't want me to see him cry. My parents didn't have much family left, and both of my grandparents had passed away early. With no relatives to rely on, I was left all alone. My father had made sure I had enough to cover college tuition, so at least I didn't have to worry about that. But the real challenge was the now empty clinic. As the only son, I had inherited it. However, the maintenance costs were steep. I didn't want to lose the clinic my father had left behind. From that moment, my goal became clear: to reopen his clinic. I started dipping into the savings my parents had left, doing my best to live frugally. My goal was to get into a national university medical school that I could commute to from home. I focused on studying for the entrance exam, and once that was over, I immediately started working part-time. My days were packed with university classes and work, leaving me only enough time to come home and sleep. To save on food costs, I'd buy discounted items at the grocery store right before closing. The one indulgence I allowed myself was on payday. On those days, I'd always go to Mary's Bento shop and treat myself to a fried chicken bento. "Working late every day, huh? You've lost a bit of weight, haven't you?" Mary always kept an eye on my health. "Compared to you, I look thin, Mary. You've gotten cheeky, haven't you?" She'd puff up her round cheeks playfully. "Here, I added a little extra for you." Mary would always pile on more rice and fried chicken. "Thanks, as always. I told you, if you ever need help, I'll be there." I'd bow my head and head home. Entering my dark, empty house, I always found myself missing the warm glow of the bento shop. About a year into this routine, I ran into Kevin in front of the shop. I was shocked by how he looked. His hair was dyed silver, he had several piercings, and even his nails were painted. Maybe it was his love for hard rock showing through. "You've really changed. This has nothing to do with you, Jason." His cold tone caught me off guard. "What's with the attitude? You just go on and be a great doctor, okay?" It wasn't just his appearance, Kevin seemed to have changed on the inside too. At that moment, Mary came out from the back of the shop. "Oh, champ, welcome." She noticed Kevin too. "Kevin, you're back. Don't just stand there, come inside." Kevin clicked his tongue and headed toward the house behind the shop. "You must be surprised. He's joined a band at college." Mary sighed. "Kevin's changed, hasn't he?" She lowered her voice. "Well, after arguing with his father about his future, he barely talks to us anymore." Kevin had gone to a 4-year university. His father, on the other hand, wanted him to attend culinary school and take over the family business. He said, "There's no way I'm taking over such an outdated shop," and since then, his relationship with his dad has been terrible. Mary had always seemed so cheerful, I had no idea this was happening. "Are you okay, Mary?" "Well, we're family. We'll figure it out," she said, brushing off the worry with her usual brightness. "Oh, here, take this." She handed me a bag filled with fried chicken, croquettes, simmered dishes, and salad. "I can't take this much. It's just leftovers." We'd have to throw it out anyway, so please take it. Mary pushed the bag into my hands. One day, I'll definitely repay you. Just seeing your face every day is enough for me. She waved her hand with a smile. A few months later, Kevin suddenly came to visit me. He had a large bag and a guitar slung over his shoulder, and he looked like he had something heavy on his mind. What's going on? Come inside. No, I'm fine here. Kevin stood at the doorway, staring at me with a serious expression. I'm leaving home. I held my breath. Why? I'm going to try to go pro. I'll be staying with a friend for a while. I didn't know what to say in that moment. To this day, I still don't know what the right response would have been. Should I have told him to stop, that going pro was unrealistic? Or should I have encouraged him and said he could do it? In the end, I couldn't say anything. I just stood there, frozen. Take care of my parents for me. What do you mean, take care of? They're your parents. But Kevin only gave a sad smile and walked away. The way he waved his hand looked just like how Mary always did. After that, Kevin really did disappear. According to Mary, he had finally left after clashing with his father about his future. By the time I was in my second year of college, my routine had settled, and I found myself with a bit more free time. Since Kevin had left, Mary had always worn a smile tinged with sadness. I started helping out at the shop whenever I had a free moment. I'll make sure to pay you for your work. Come on, with all the fried chicken you've given me over the years, I'm still in debt. As I worked at the shop, I began to notice something. Mary always made extra fried chicken. And she would hand it to me, saying it was leftover. You shouldn't do that, Mary. If you keep this up, your shop will go under. I had already sensed that the shop wasn't doing well financially. I'm so glad you're here, champ. This is my way of saying thank you. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she clasped her hands together. I'm sure she saw a bit of Kevin in me. While working alongside Mary, I managed to finish my 6 years of medical school. Of course, when it came time to prepare for the national exam, Mary insisted I stop helping. If Champ doesn't pass because of this, I won't be able to face your parents. With her support, I passed the exam on the first try. I spent the next 5 years as a resident at the university hospital. As a resident, my life was consumed by work and studying, with barely any time to sleep. Working night shifts, I often found myself passing by the dark bento shop more and more. I wonder how Mary's doing. I'd mutter to myself, too exhausted to do anything but fall asleep. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I found myself walking by the bento shop again for the first time in a long while. It was dinner time, and the shop was bustling with customers. As I passed by, I saw Mary busy packing bento boxes and side dishes, but I tried to slip by unnoticed. Hey, champ. Wait up. Mary had spotted me. You haven't eaten yet, have you? Here, take this. She handed me a special bento, packed with extra side dishes. Mary, I'm working now, you know, I said, pulling a 1,000 yen bill from my wallet. I know, but you'll always be like a kid to me, she said with a smile. Her face was thinner, and there were more wrinkles than I remembered. Mary, are you okay? You're not overworking yourself, are you? I'm fine, just a little busy. I realized she must have been close to 60 by then. Don't push yourself too hard. She waved me off with her usual gesture as I left. After my residency, I was set to move to a distant general hospital to further specialize in orthopedic surgery. I tried to visit the shop several times to say goodbye, but it was often closed. Just before my transfer, I stopped by her house, and Kevin's father answered the door. "She's in the hospital." "What happened?" "She's just exhausted, but don't worry, she'll be out in a week." Not wanting to show her weakness, she refused any visits. And so, I moved without getting the chance to say goodbye. I worked at my new hospital for a long time, building up 20 years of experience. Eventually, I decided to return to the university hospital to prepare for reopening my father's clinic. I wrote to Mary several times, but never received a reply. After settling in at the university, I headed straight for the Bento shop, only to find it permanently closed. I rang the doorbell at her house, but there was no answer. I slumped my shoulders in disappointment. Where could Mary have gone? I shook off the worst-case scenario from my mind. Work at the university hospital quickly consumed me, and I didn't have time to search for her. Then, one day, an elderly woman came in, complaining of severe back pain. She had been referred by a local clinic that suspected another condition. When I glanced at the name on the chart, I was speechless. Mary. It was Mary. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her back bent and her body much thinner than I remembered. She squinted, trying to make out my face. "Mary, it's me." My voice trembled. She tilted her head in confusion. "It's me, Jason. Kevin's childhood friend." Her eyes widened in recognition. "Oh, champ. Look at how you've grown. It's all thanks to you, Mary. I didn't do anything. You're the one who worked hard, champ." Her face, now lined with age, was streaked with tears. "I'm so glad I got to see you." Mary's husband had already passed away, and now she was living with relatives. "What about Kevin?" Mary weakly shook her head. "I see." I gently helped Mary lie down and began her examination. Looking at the X-rays and test results, it was clear she needed treatment beyond orthopedics. She would need internal medicine and possibly surgery. "I've lived long enough. I don't want any more tests or treatments," Mary said quietly, her words causing my hands to clench into fists. "Don't say that. We'll get through this together," I said, gripping her hand tightly, making a promise. Where had her once plump hands gone? Now, they were just skin and bones. After consulting with internal medicine and surgery, Mary was admitted to the hospital immediately. The plan was to restore her strength through internal treatment before proceeding with surgery. I visited her every day. "Are you eating properly, champ?" She asked me the same thing she had 30 years ago. "I'm eating just fine," I replied, knowing that in her eyes, I was still the 18-year-old boy she once knew. As she continued her treatment, another issue became apparent. Her cognitive function was declining. At first, it was just minor forgetfulness and emotional outbursts. Then, slowly, in her mind, I regressed to being an elementary school kid. Thanks to Champ visiting, Kevin's doing his homework again. "Oh, today I've got plenty of fried chicken." In reality, Kevin had just copied my notes back then. "And sometimes we gave the fried chicken to stray dogs." "Thanks, Mary." Somehow, that became the only thing I could say in response. Occasionally, Mary would return to the present. When I visited, I'd find her lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling. "I wonder how Kevin's doing." A sharp pain stabbed through my chest. Back at the office, I made a decision and placed a call. 2 weeks later, a man walked into Mary's hospital room. A woman holding a child stood behind him. I quickly stood up from where I had been sitting with Mary. "Kevin, you came." Kevin nodded to me. Sorry for not getting in touch sooner. Please go see Mary. I stepped aside to give him room. To find Kevin, I had called every middle school friend I could remember. I even asked our old teacher and some neighbors. It turned out Kevin had been closer than I thought. He had become a chef and was working in the neighboring city. He had given up on becoming a professional musician during his student days. "Mom!" Kevin gently called out to her. Mary slowly opened her eyes. "Who is it?" "It's me, Kevin." "Kevin?" "Yeah, it's me." "Mom, remember when you got mad at me for copying Jason's homework? Or when you made me skip dinner because I didn't help out at the shop? And when I said I wanted to be in a band, you told me I had talent?" Kevin's voice trembled as he spoke. The woman behind him, likely his wife. She held their child close. "Kevin. Kevin, you've come home." Finally, recognition lit up Mary's eyes. "How are you? Are you hungry?" She reached out her frail hand to touch him. Kevin gently took her hand in his, holding it tightly. "I'm sorry for worrying you, Mom." Mary motioned with her free hand, and I adjusted the bed so she could sit up. "I'm married now, Mom. And this is your grandchild." His wife carefully brought their child closer to Mary. The little boy looked a bit nervous. Mary softly patted his head. "He looks just like you, Kevin," she said, her voice filled with warmth. I watched them from the side and quietly left the room. About 30 minutes later, I got a call from the nurse's station. "Kevin wanted to see me." "Jason, thank you," he said, looking a bit embarrassed. At that moment, I felt a surge of anger. He had left Mary alone for over 20 years, and yet she never uttered a single word of resentment toward him. "Let's talk," I said coldly, and we headed to the hospital courtyard. "Why didn't you reach out all these years?" Mary had always wanted to see him. Living just one city over, he could have come any time. "I did come," Kevin shot back, his voice rising in anger at my accusatory tone. "I went to the shop. I saw you there, working with her, like you were her real son." "It's always been that way. You were the smart, good kid. My parents' favorite." Kevin's emotions erupted. "That's not true. They were just worried about me. My dad used to say, if only Kevin were as smart as Jason, I could trust him with the shop." "No, you've got it wrong. It only means they had high hopes for you. I hated always being compared to you." Kevin's sharp words left me speechless. But after swallowing my pride, I asked him again. "Did you hate me?" "Yeah, I did." I lowered my head, my shoulders trembling. "Okay. Then I won't show up in front of you or Mary ever again. But you, please, be there for her." I fought back tears. I had always thought I was grateful to both Mary and Kevin. But maybe I had been the one to sever their bond. Perhaps I would never see either of them again. At that moment, I truly believed it would be the last time I'd see them. For a while after, I closely monitored Mary's condition. However, her health continued to deteriorate. The surgeons eventually told me that surgery was no longer an option, leaving my heart in turmoil. The decision was made to switch to palliative care, and she was scheduled for a transfer to another hospital. On the day of the transfer, I stood by the window, looking down at the hospital's roundabout. Soon, a car would arrive, and Mary would be taken to the new facility. Just then, my phone rang in my pocket. Mary's family would like to say their final goodbyes. "Kevin?" I quickly made my way to her room. The room was tidy, and everything was ready for the transfer. As I entered, Kevin walked over to me with big strides. "I'm sorry about last time," he said, bowing deeply. After that, I was able to talk to Mom a bit. She told me how much she appreciated you. I'm the one who could never repay her. Actually, Kevin looked straight at me. "I'm thinking of reopening the bento shop. But there's one problem." "A problem?" I thought maybe it was funding. Or family opposition. "The fried chicken recipe. The only person who can teach me is you." I couldn't help but burst out laughing. "My teaching fee isn't cheap, you know. I'll pay you with 10 bentos. That's a deal." We shook hands firmly. Mary watched us with a big smile on her face. Less than a year later, Mary passed away peacefully. Her face looked serene, as if she had found peace. Kevin reopened the bento shop and now works tirelessly, pouring his heart into it. As for me, I'm finally fulfilling my 20-year dream of reopening my father's clinic this spring. The scent of fried chicken wafted through the air, carried by the petals of cherry blossoms.